Hello, this is Pat Tormey, and today we have something really new and exciting to show you. And that's that we've now got a tool inside Visual Studio 2008 that does charting for us. And it doesn't just do a little bit of charting, it does a lot of charting. So a couple things I have to show you. First of all, if you've got it installed correctly, it'll show up right here under Data, and you can drag it and drop it. And there you have your very first Microsoft chart. Chances are, however, you don't actually have that installed. So we're going to take a minute and show you how to install it, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so let's get started on the install. First thing you want to do is download everything you need, and of course we'll accept the license agreement. And this will install Framework 3.5 SP1, which is a requirement to use the chart control. Once that's done, then you can use the Visual Studio add-in tool, and this is what actually puts it into your toolbox. And again, we accept the license agreement. And now we're ready. I got to show you where the real cheat sheet is, because this time they made us a good one. What we're going to do here, I'll just hide this for a second. We're going to pull up the samples that should have been installed when you installed the MS chart. And the one in particular we're going to be using is the Win samples, but the chart also works with web samples, and they're all here. So I'm going to fire that up. And it'll show what I really like about this sample. Let me maximize that. Not only do you have a sample of all the different chart types and how to get started, but you also frequently have both the C# and the Visual Basic Code. So this means you can actually run through these, say, hey, there's a good looking chart, I'd like to know how to do that one, or a series of points, or how to work with data, or one of my favorites, the donut chart. But as you can see, you get the C# code, and you get the Visual Basic Code, and you get a little working sample here to play with, so you can actually interactively change it as you go. That's interesting. Psychedelic. Never would have thought of that. Okay, here's the Visual Basic sort. There's a number of times in the Visual Basic Code we'll find the random semicolon kicking in there from one of our C# friends, leaving us a little test to see if we're paying attention. Anyway, we'll point those out as we go along. And there's a couple other fairly minor things, but it's probably good for you to keep an eye out for them. For example, here's a beautiful example of the stacked bar chart. And I go to the Visual Basic Code, and we seem to have a little sprinkling of semicolons in there. And there's a couple places where the looping algorithm actually goes off the array list. Alright, so now you see it. There's a beautiful bunch of things you can do. You've seen how to install it. Let me show you how to do just a simple one for us. I'm going to kill that guy and get back to this handy chart. Now the chart itself, you can go in here and you can actually just change the properties and tell it you'd like to go, there's the chart name, we'd like to go into the data. In this case it's called the series. Here it says series 1, and we can put a series of points in there. So I'll just throw some data in here so you can have a look at it. We'll put in some fairly random values. And as you can see, this is the manual way of handling it, and that's not the preferred method. We're going to program this thing. You can come in here and set titles. Here's my title 1. And there's a lot you can do to configure it. Okay, so let's go on and take a look at something a little more interesting than this. We'll turn this one into a pie chart for us. In this case, I'm going to delete this guy. Drop a new one on there. And we're data kind of people, so we're going to go in there and get some data. Now the way you do this is the same way you always do. I'm going to start with the Solution Explorer. I'm going to tell it that I need to go get some data. I'm going to add a new data source from a database. And I'll make a new connection. I'm going to use the SQL Server database file for the SQL Express. Wander over and find some data. Cleverly stashed under data. Northwind, of course, one of our old buddies. Okay, now that we got our data set handy, let's take a look at what's in there. I have sales by all years table adapter. We'll go in there and preview the data. And you can see I've extracted a little bit of data here and suppressed the nulls. There happen to be a bunch of nulls in there which are making for very ugly charts. Okay, now I go back to my form and close all but this. Sure, we can do that. Come to this thing, select a control, F4 to get to my properties, and I'm going to tell it what the data source is. Well, I don't have a data source in the control itself, in the form itself, so I'll just go get one and connect up, and we'll tell it to use that one. That gives me the local data set, an instance of the data set, and the binding source. And so all I should have to do is to go to my code behind and put some data in there. Alright, all I did there was populate the table adapter and then fill it up. But I'm getting ahead of myself by a little bit. I always like to give references to people, so let me show you where you can get some more information on this. And there's some good material coming out these days. Here's information on the Microsoft chart controls. And remember, they're also for web forms as well as Winforms. Here's where you can do the downloads from. And a whole lot of good samples right here. Alright, back to work. Now you'd think when you did that right away it would recognize the table adapter and just jump right in, but it doesn't. The reason is I filled the table adapter, but I haven't actually told the chart to do anything yet, so he didn't do anything. Now the default in here in that chart is to have Series 1. I don't choose to use Series 1. So what I'm going to do is just tell it to clear whatever it has now. And tell it series.clear. Straightforward enough. And now to get the data actually bound, I have to tell it where to bind to, so I'll say me chart 1. And there it is, the data bind table. And then you tell them what to bind to, and of course I want them to use my local one. Okay, that should give us something. Let's see what we get. I'll save that and run it. Okay, and like magic, we have a complete chart. This is very impressive stuff, I got to tell you. I haven't actually had a lot of time to play with this, and the more I play with it, the more impressed I am. Now, there's other things you'd like to do. I'm going to go ahead and just show you a couple quick ones. There's chart 1, and we'll tell it that this time what I'd like to do is to have the series for Series 0, I believe it is. Chart type equal to, and there's where all our choices come in. And I like donuts, so we'll make it a donut type and see what happens. Not too shabby, huh? And there's other things we can do, other features we can put in there. This time I'm going to tell it I'd like to have it the point. In this case, I'll just pick the first point. Exploded. Okay, well that kind of broke my donut in half here because it shows part 1, so I'll make that to make it part 2. And this time I'm going to give it just a slightly different thing. I'm going to tell it I'd like it to see the chart as a 3D style. Chart areas, and of course it's my 0th area. There's another collection of chart areas inside each chart. and I'll tell it that the area style is going to be 3D, and I'm going to enable that and set that equal to true. Save it. And we're off and running with a very cool looking 3D donut chart. This is Pat Tormey. Let me just drag that back onto the screen for us. This is Pat Tormey, and this has been your introduction to using MS Charts with the Microsoft Framework 3.5.